In the small, desolate town of Ravensbrook, whispers of an old legend kept the townsfolk indoors after dark. The legend spoke of a ghost, one with an insatiable hunger, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the unwary. They called it the Hungry Shade. It began with the tale of Agnes Holloway, a once beloved baker known for her delectable pastries and warm smile. Agnes lived alone in a quaint cottage at the edge of Ravensbrook, where the forest met the town. Her life was simple, and she found joy in her craft. But one bitter winter night, something changed. Agnes was found lifeless in her kitchen, eyes wide open in terror, her face twisted into a grotesque mask of horror. The townsfolk buried her with heavy hearts, but her spirit did not rest. Months after her death, strange occurrences began. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air at odd hours, even though the bakery had long been abandoned. Villagers reported seeing a shadowy figure flitting between the trees near Agnes's old home. Animals started disappearing, and then, one by one, so did the people. First, it was old Mr. Weiraker, who lived alone at the edge of the forest. Then, the school teacher Miss Clara vanished without a trace. Each time someone went missing, the villagers found a trail of crumbs leading into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. Fear gripped the town, and no one dared to venture near the old bakery or the forest after sunset. One evening, young Daniel, a curious and brave lad, decided to uncover the truth. Armed with nothing but a lantern and his grandmother's old journal filled with protective charms, he crept towards the forest. The air grew colder, and the silence was deafening. As he approached Agnes's cottage, the scent of bread grew stronger, mingling with a sickly sweet aroma. Inside the bakery, everything seemed untouched, as if frozen in time. Flour dusted the counters, and pans hung neatly on hooks. But then, Daniel's lantern flickered, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He turned slowly and saw it, a gaunt, spectral figure with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. The Hungry Shade. It moved with an eerie grace, its eyes fixed on Daniel, hunger evident in its every movement. Just as the ghost reached out, Daniel stumbled backwards, dropping his lantern. The flame sputtered and then roared to life, illuminating the room. The ghost recoiled, letting out an unearthly wail that echoed through the forest. Daniel seized the moment and bolted out of the cottage, never looking back. He returned to the village, breathless and pale, sharing his encounter with anyone who would listen. The villagers were both relieved and terrified, knowing the legend was true. They fortified their homes with charms and offerings, hoping to appease the Hungry Shade and keep it at bay. But deep in the forest, the ghost of Agnes Holloway still roams, forever hungry, forever searching. And each night, as darkness falls, the scent of freshly baked bread drifts through the air, a chilling reminder that the Hungry Shade is never far away. The village of Ravensbrook tried to return to some semblance of normalcy after Daniel's harrowing encounter. They lit lanterns and bonfires at night, hoping the light would keep the Hungry Shade at bay. But a pervasive sense of dread hung over the town, and the shadows seemed to grow longer with each passing day. Daniel, despite his fear, was determined to learn more. He spent hours poring over his grandmother's journal, searching for anything that might explain Agnes's transformation into the Hungry Shade. The journal contained ancient tales and rituals, protective charms, and obscure references to spirits and curses, but nothing seemed to offer a clear solution. One evening, while flipping through the brittle pages, Daniel found a hidden compartment in the back cover. Inside was a small, folded piece of parchment. Unfolding it, he discovered a faded map of the forest surrounding Ravensbrook. Marked on the map were several symbols and an X near a place called Holloway's Glen. Beside the map was a single note in his grandmother's handwriting. The key lies in the glen. Seek the source of her torment. Driven by a sense of duty and curiosity, Daniel decided to venture into the forest again. This time, he was accompanied by his best friend, Emily, who was equally determined to uncover the truth. Armed with the map, charms, and supplies, they set out at dawn, hoping to reach the glen before nightfall. The forest was eerily silent, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. As they followed the map, the trees seemed to close in around them, their gnarled branches forming a natural canopy that blocked out the sun. Hours passed, and just as they began to doubt the map's accuracy, they stumbled upon Holloway's Glen. The glen was a small clearing, overgrown with wild flowers and vines. At its center stood an ancient, twisted oak tree, its roots digging deep into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, freshly baked bread. Daniel and Emily exchanged a worried glance, but they pressed on. Beneath the oak tree, they found a small, weathered gravestone. The inscription read, "Here lies Agnes Holloway, betrayed and forsaken." As they knelt to examine the grave, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, and the temperature dropped. The scent of bread intensified, and a shadowy figure materialized before them. It was the hungry shade, its hollow eyes filled with sorrow and rage. Daniel and Emily stood their ground, clutching their charms and the map. The ghost moved closer, its form shifting and wavering. Daniel remembered his grandmother's note and spoke aloud. "Agnes Holloway, we seek the source of your torment. We wish to free you." The ghost paused, its gaze fixed on the gravestone. A soft, mournful wail escaped its lips, and suddenly, the ground beneath the oak tree began to tremble. The earth parted, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, they found a small, ornate box covered in dust and cobwebs. With trembling hands, Emily opened the box, revealing a collection of letters and a rusted locket. As they read the letters, the tragic story of Agnes Holloway unfolded. She had been betrayed by a lover, who, out of jealousy and greed, accused her of witchcraft. The villagers, blinded by fear, turned on Agnes, leading to her untimely death. Consumed by anger and sorrow, her spirit had lingered, transforming into the hungry shade. Realizing the truth, Daniel and Emily knew what they had to do. They placed the locket on the gravestone and recited a cleansing ritual from the journal. The hungry shade let out a final, anguished cry before dissolving into a wisp of smoke. The air grew warmer, and the scent of bread faded, replaced by the fresh scent of wild flowers. With the curse lifted, Daniel and Emily returned to Ravensbrook, carrying the letters as proof of Agnes's innocence. The village held a proper memorial for Agnes Holloway, laying her spirit to rest at last. The forest grew peaceful again, and the shadows receded. But deep in the heart of the forest, near the ancient oak tree, a faint whisper could sometimes be heard, a reminder that while the hungry shade was gone, the past was never truly forgotten. And as Daniel and Emily would soon discover, some secrets were still waiting to be uncovered. Weeks passed since Daniel and Emily had lifted the curse on Agnes Holloway. The village of Ravensbrook breathed easier, but an undercurrent of unease remained. Despite the apparent peace, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal wasn't over. One evening, as Daniel and Emily were examining the letters they had recovered, a strange symbol caught their attention. It was a simple design, a series of interlocking circles, marked on the bottom of one letter. Daniel's grandmother's journal mentioned a similar symbol, describing it as the mark of the covetous, an ancient emblem tied to dark magic and betrayal. "Emily, look at this," Daniel said, pointing to the symbol. "This isn't just about Agnes. I think there's more to this story." Emily nodded, her eyes narrowing. "We need to find out what this symbol means and who was behind it." The next day, they visited the village library, a dusty old building filled with forgotten lore. After hours of searching through musty tomes and scrolls, they found a reference to the Mark of the Covetous. It belonged to an old, secretive cult known as the Circle of Shadows, rumored to practice forbidden rituals and make pacts with malevolent spirits. The Circle of Shadows had a dark history in Ravensbrook, having been involved in numerous mysterious disappearances and deaths over the centuries. The cult had supposedly been disbanded long ago, but Daniel and Emily now suspected that its influence had never truly vanished. Determined to uncover the truth, they decided to investigate the oldest parts of the village. They spoke to the elders, who were reluctant to discuss the cult, but one old woman, Mrs. Thatcher, finally opened up. She told them about the hidden tunnels beneath the village, used by the cult for their secret gatherings. These tunnels, she explained, were believed to be cursed and were sealed off years ago. Armed with this new information, Daniel and Emily set out to find the entrance to the tunnels. They discovered it beneath the ruins of an old chapel on the outskirts of Ravensbrook. The entrance was covered in moss and half buried, but after some effort, they managed to pry open the rusted gate. The air inside the tunnels was damp and cold, the walls lined with ancient carvings and symbols. Their flashlight beams flickered, casting eerie shadows as they descended deeper. The scent of earth and decay grew stronger, and the oppressive silence weighed heavily on them. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber. At its center was a stone altar, covered in dark stains and surrounded by the same interlocking circle symbols. On the altar lay a book bound in aged leather. As Emily picked it up, the chill ran through her, and she could feel an unnatural presence watching them. They quickly flipped through the book, which contained detailed accounts of the cult's rituals and sacrifices. One entry, dated shortly before Anez's death, mentioned a ritual meant to transfer power from a chosen one to the cult's leader. The entry hinted that Agnes was the chosen one, and her death had been orchestrated to siphon her spiritual energy. Suddenly, a low, rumbling noise echoed through the chamber, and the walls began to shake. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling, and the air grew colder. A ghostly figure appeared, its form wavering and indistinct. It was not Agnes, but a different spirit, one filled with rage and malevolence. "You have trespassed where you do not belong," the spirit hissed. "Leave now, or suffer the same fate as those before you." Daniel and Emily backed away slowly, clutching the book. As they turned to flee, the spirit lunged at them, its icy fingers grazing Emily's arm. She cried out in pain, and Daniel pulled her away, sprinting through the tunnels with the ghost in pursuit. They barely made it out, slamming the gate shut behind them. Gasping for breath, they looked at the book in Emily's hands. It was clear that they had uncovered something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The circle of shadows was not only real, but still active, and the spirit in the tunnels was a guardian of their dark secrets. As they returned to the village, they knew they had to warn the others and find a way to stop the cult once and for all. But the presence of the spirit and the book's sinister contents suggested that their fight was just beginning. The circle of shadows had hidden in the darkness for centuries, and now it was up to Daniel and Emily to bring their deeds to light. As Daniel and Emily returned to the village, the weight of the book seemed to press heavily on their spirits. They knew they had to warn the townsfolk and uncover the remaining members of the Circle of Shadows. That night, they convened a secret meeting with the village elders, showing them the book and recounting their harrowing experience in the tunnels. The elders, faces pale and eyes wide with fear, listened intently. After a lengthy discussion, they agreed to help Daniel and Emily investigate further. They formed a plan to search the village for clues and identify those who might still be involved with the cult. Over the next few days, whispers spread through Ravensbrook, and the village was abuzz with fear and suspicion. Old grievances and buried secrets began to surface as everyone looked at their neighbors with newfound wariness. Daniel and Emily, along with a few trusted villagers, combed through old records and questioned the oldest inhabitants, trying to piece together the puzzle. One night, as they were going through the book again, Emily found a hidden compartment in the back cover. Inside was a key, tarnished with age, and a note that read, "The final secret lies beneath the heart of Ravensbrook." They realized that the village well, located in the central square, was likely the heart mentioned in the note. Gathering their courage, Daniel, Emily, and a few elders made their way to the well at midnight. They used the key to unlock a concealed hatch beside the well, revealing a narrow staircase descending into the earth. The air grew colder as they descended, their lanterns casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. At the bottom, they found a large, hidden chamber filled with relics and symbols of the Circle of Shadows. In the center of the room was another altar, similar to the one they had found in the tunnels, but larger and more ornate. Surrounding the altar were several cloaked figures, their faces hidden in shadow. One of the figures stepped forward, pulling back their hood to reveal an elderly man with piercing eyes. It was Mr. Thorne, one of the village's most respected elders. His face twisted into a malevolent grin as he spoke. "Welcome, Daniel and Emily. I see you've uncovered our secrets, but your meddling ends here." The cloaked figures began chanting, and a dark energy filled the room. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew thick with an oppressive force. Daniel and Emily clutched their charms, but they felt their power waning against the sheer malevolence of the cult's ritual. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with an unearthly howl, and the ghostly figure from the tunnels appeared, its rage palpable. It swooped down upon the cultists, causing chaos and confusion. Daniel and Emily seized the moment, rushing to the altar and overturning it, disrupting the ritual. The chamber shook violently, and the cloaked figures screamed as they were engulfed in a dark, swirling mist. The spirits' howls grew louder, echoing through the chamber, and the walls began to crumble. Daniel and Emily fled up the staircase, the ground shaking beneath their feet. They barely made it out as the well collapsed behind them, sealing the chamber and its dark secrets forever. The village square was eerily silent, the stars above casting a cold, indifferent light. In the days that followed, Ravensbrook tried to move on, but a deep unease lingered. The well was covered and consecrated, but Daniel and Emily knew that the darkness they had uncovered would never truly be banished. The villagers looked at each other with suspicion, wondering who else might have been part of the cult. As the weeks passed, Daniel and Emily noticed strange occurrences. Whispers in the night, fleeting shadows in the corners of their vision, and the scent of freshly baked bread drifting through the air. They realized that the spirit of Agnes Holloway was not the only restless soul. One cold, moonless night, Daniel awoke to find Emily missing from her bed. He searched the house frantically, but she was nowhere to be found. His heart pounding, he ran to the village square, where he found her standing by the well, her eyes vacant and her movements stiff. "Emily," he called, but she did not respond. As he approached, he saw a faint, dark mist swirling around her. The spirit of the cult's guardian had found a new host, and it was hungry for vengeance. Daniel reached out to her, but the spirit's cold, spectral hand grasped his wrist. A chilling whisper filled his mind, "The circle of shadows will rise again." In that moment, Daniel knew that the darkness they had fought so hard to dispel was far from gone. It had merely changed its form, waiting for the right moment to strike. And as the spirit's grip tightened, he realized that he and Emily had become the latest victims of Ravensbrook's ancient curse, their fates entwined with the shadows forever. The village would never be free, and the hungry shade's legacy would live on, haunting the night and claiming new souls to feed its insatiable hunger.